The following program is made possible by supporters and friends of Biblical Foundations Academy International.
Previously, on Time Will Tell, there was no being politically correct if I was going to interact with Jewish folks about this topic. As it pertains to God's clock, the Hebrew word chodesh for new moon is like the mechanism inside a clock that makes it work. I believe that we're in a very important time in history where God is allowing us to grab a hold of things that historically we have not had access to. We have access to the Bible in a way that we haven't had. We have access to information, inspiration, and revelation as it pertains to time.
Everything that evolves inside the Jewish world evolves around the Torah, evolves around this calendar which establishes the Moadim, the appointed times. The moment we move them, the moment we have a different appointed time, we have a different appointment with God. So we have a calendar which is based on the cycle of the universe. But how do you decide which part of the cycle? That was the point of dispute.
Understanding the Roman influence in Israel's history is crucial to understanding the present Jewish perspective on God's clock. I knew the general vicinity of my next stop. However, as they say, the devil's in the details. I consulted one of the locals for directions. However, it seemed that I had run into another language barrier. Sort of. How are you, my friend?
אני לא יודע אנגליזי.
כן. אתה מבין עברית?
אני לא יודע אנגליזי כלל.
אוקיי, אני מבין. אוקיי, ביי ביי. להתראות.
ודי מוסרי, money.
כסף! I wanted to find a way to the top of this mountain, and the road I was on just wasn't getting me there. I was in a place called Tiberias by the Sea of Galilee, and was getting frustrated. Have you ever tried to read a map with all Hebrew words? It looked like there was a way to get to the top of the mountain, but I just couldn't tell if it was accessible by vehicle. I even considered hopping on one of these guys for a ride. They didn't look either willing or interested. I finally found some help on how to get to the top. Have you ever heard the saying, be careful what you ask for? You gotta be kidding me.
You guys have to be really important. I mean, out here I'm at Mount Arbel, the highest mountain at Tiberias, and I'm climbing up here for you because I'm trying to get you some perspective. When I get up there, I'm gonna tell you what I think, but right now, let's keep climbing.
It's time to get back to work. So what do? We always like to get the power perspective. I want to go to the highest part of Tiberias so that we can get a bird's eye view of everything and then work ourselves down to where I believe there's some information, some inspiration and revelation that will help us rediscover God's clock. I stopped on my way down from what I call the Mount of Perspective, officially named Mount Arbel, to try and decide which place to go first that would best explain the source of the Roman influence over the Jewish calendar. I found it. These are the ruins of ancient Tiberias on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. The city is named after Tiberius Julius Caesar. During the Roman occupation after the destruction of the temple, Tiberias was a refuge for Jews who were willing to live in a city in Israel that had a strong Roman Greek culture. The Sanhedrin, or what I like to call the Jewish Calendar Committee, made up of Jewish religious leaders, fled from Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple by the Romans and settled in Tiberias. This very well may have been one of the synagogues they sat in when they inaugurated the modern Jewish calendar back in the 4th century.
Well, I'm sitting at the bema of the synagogue. They had it set so that the Sanhedrin would actually meet in a semicircle. Many other organizations have taken this model. Can I just give you my opinion? I haven't talked a lot about my opinion. I think it's interesting that they sat in a semicircle. Could it be that the semicircle represents the crescent of the moon? I don't know, but it sure sounds good. I love this place. It's an amazing place. We're going to show you as much as we can from the Sanhedrin all the way back in the 300s.
Unfortunately, the Jewish remnant wanted to fit in so that their persecution would potentially be lessened. What they were willing to do to appease their Roman persecutors
might be a bit of a shock to some.
I'm going to try to not be too excited. I'm going to try to calm down. I'm sure you guys are a little tired of all my excited, but I am excited about this. This is an amazing place. This place here represents everything that we've been talking about. I'm here in a place called Tiberia, or you might know it as Tiberias, or the Sea of Galilee. It's a beautiful place. It represents so many things. I could talk to you about Julius Caesar. I could talk to you about January 1st. I could talk to you about all of those things. But first, I've got to bring you to this spot. I am sitting at a place of an ancient synagogue. In fact, this synagogue represents the place where the Sanhedrin would have met several different places around Israel, but the last stop was here. And as a result of what was happening, here is where they had to make the decision to create a 19-year cycle calendar based on the Babylonian cycle. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. Instead, I want to talk about the floor. The oldest mosaic found in Israel and the oldest picture of the zodiac found in the world. What's amazing about the pictures you're about to see is that they combined in the floor of the synagogue the sun god Helios with the zodiac right next to the images from the very temple that we've been talking about this entire project. Why is this amazing? Because they were trying to make a decision. How do we deal with the present persecutors that are around us who are sun god worshipers? How do we deal with the fact that we're basing everything that we're about on the temple and the images that are there? They mix them. And unfortunately, that mixing is still continuing. I want you to take a look at these pictures, and then we're going to move on to other parts of Sea of Galilee. But this is an amazing place, and I'm sorry, but I just can't let you know, woo, we found it.
After seeing this floor of an ancient Jewish synagogue with the sun god Helios mixed in with holy objects from the temple, I really had what I call a Roman headache. I really did need a break, and what better place to relax than the Sea of Galilee right across the street.
I got to take a break. Let's take a break from the project, go out on the Sea of Galilee, and just, spend a little time out here. Relax.
After my relaxing boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, I knew it was time to get back to work. So I made my way to Mount Gilboa, where King Saul was killed, and there was another ancient synagogue called Beit Alpha. I'm sure you can guess why I stopped by this place. This model shows a floor that is even more complete than the synagogue in Tiberias, and the message is just as clear.
Well, I thought we had found the mother lode when we were in Hamat outside of Tiberias, the ancient synagogue in the 1st or 2nd and 3rd centuries. But as a result of some research by our BFA team, we've been now led to this place called Beit Alpha, which is not far from Beit Shan, which is really not that far from Tiberias, another community that was destroyed by earthquake. But in the 6th century, this place actually was a thriving synagogue. What they did is they decided to place on the floor of their synagogue 3 images. 1, Abraham and Isaac. 2, the temple and the issues in the temple. For example, the candelabra, shofars. But in the middle, they have, again, this image of the zodiac.
I now had my suspicions that the zodiac and Helios on the floor of both synagogues was sending a clear message regarding the reckoning of time. Placing the sun surrounded by the reading of the stars is the key way to determine the beginning of the year and Easter in the Greek culture, and also was adopted by the new emerging Christian culture. If the Jews were trying to send a message of connection with the surrounding suspicious Roman persecutors, then what better way to do that than to get on the same page with them regarding time, or at least put forth the perception of such an attempt. But what about the beginning of the biblical year and Passover? Had the Jews sacrificed the importance of celebrating Passover on God's calendar in order to fit in with the surrounding nations? As I was leaving Beit Alpha, I noticed a place that looked like some sort of minimum security facility that had Ethiopian people inside. It took my best Hebrew accent along with a big smile to talk my way past the security guard. I explained in Hebrew that I wanted to speak to the Ethiopian rabbi of the community. Voila! I had hit the jackpot. The rabbi explained that he was inviting the entire community in to teach them the Passover Seder that was coming. He invited me to sit in and even video the entire presentation. I watched as Ethiopian men, women, and children came in and took their seats wondering about the strange-looking food on the table and what the rabbi was about to teach them about Passover. Just when the program was about to start, I noticed that the rabbi had left and a security guard walked in and made a beeline toward me with, let's just say, he had angst in his eyes. The rest is history. Somebody reported that a Methodist with a camera was in the community. My Hebrew with a smile paled in comparison to his angry tone and big gun. As he escorted me out of the room, he kept asking me how I got in and said something about me being forbidden from being in the community and that I should certainly stop taking video. Let's just say that Beit Alpha is a little like Las Vegas. What happens in Beit Alpha is supposed to stay in Beit Alpha. I just happened to break into the most controversial Ethiopian immersion center in all of Israel, while the rabbi was teaching about Passover. Go figure.
So I'm here at Beit Alpha, which happens to be an Ethiopian community. Wonderful, beautiful place here. Kind of has a fence all the way around it. Got a chance to go in and see the community as they're preparing for Passover. It was an amazing experience. However, the security got a little nervous with us being in there. Didn't want us to take any pictures and actually wanted us to leave. But now we're outside of the community, but we had a great time in there while we were there. It was a blessing. And they've been celebrating Passover. The teacher told me he's been celebrating Passover since he was a little boy in Ethiopia, and now he wants to teach the community about the coming Passover here in Israel.
I ran into this peacock right after getting thrown out of the Ethiopian community. He was a picture of the next stop on our journey. As beautiful as he was, I had not seen his full array of colors. In the same way, I needed Judaism to display the depth and beauty of this issue of God's clock. I had bitten off a big chunk of information, so I sped back to Jerusalem to see if I could arrange a meeting with a modern-day Pharisee who could help me digest it all. I had heard that this rabbi looks for God's clock in the sky every month from this very spot in Israel and reports his findings to Jews and Gentiles throughout the diaspora. I found him and asked if he would help me understand God's clock versus the rabbinic, or as he says, the fixed calendar. Introducing Dr. Rabbi Daniel Jackson, head of the Israeli New Moon Society. I decided to jump right in by asking him about the history of the Roman influence on the Jewish calendar. I probably got more than I bargained for, but that was okay by me.
We have to remember that during the what's called the Talmudic age, when the Talmud was being put together, in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd centuries of the Common Era, this land was occupied by Rome. Rome is a highly secularized area, and the temple had been destroyed, and the rabbis were maintaining Jewish life here in the land. When the land began to empty out through a series of deprivations and massacres by the Romans, and more of Jewish life began to settle in the Babylonian area of Mesopotamia, there was a need of leaving the land and the loss of authority for the calendar. The process of Hellenization, which was really a form of modern way of looking at it as secularization, was constantly removing and extracting the religious components, especially around time. It is the state that determines when an event occurs. It is the state that occurs when hours begin or whatever. This process continues pretty much to today.
After looking at the headquarters of God's clock from a variety of angles and interacting with Rabbi Mordecai, Yoel Halevi, and Rabbi Jackson, I was finally ready to enter in with the Jewish people who applied the clock to their religious lives. I just needed an invitation to join them on their turf, the synagogue. Oh, I also wanted to bring my trusty camera as a witness. Yoel invited me to travel with him to his in-laws' Orthodox synagogue in a small Jewish settlement in the West Bank called Elazar, which means God helps, for the first night of a 2-day celebration called Purim. The timing of the celebration takes place one time every year when God's clock is full in the sky in the 12th biblical month. It was a powerful experience to arrive in Elazar and look up and see what time it was based on God's clock in the heavens, rather than to be dependent on a clock or calendar on earth. I was ready to get to the synagogue, but first Yoel suggested I get a quick overview of the Purim celebration from his father-in-law.
Hi, I'm Dale Baranowski, and I'm Yoel Halevi's father-in-law. Yes, he is my son-in-law. All right, this evening we're going to be starting Purim, and the first thing on the agenda after it's fully dark is that we have the evening service, the Orthodox Jewish standard evening service, which is pretty much standard in itself, although This service may be a bit more festive in that the one who leads the service will probably be putting in more of a festive and more interesting and more melodic melodies to it. Immediately after the service, that's when we're going to be reading the Megillah, the Book of Esther. There will be many, both children and adults, who will be dressed up to make themselves look ridiculous. That should be, it's rather unusual, and the first time I ever saw it myself, I was extremely impressed, because everyone, including the rabbi, nobody takes each other seriously at this particular holiday, and I was always extremely impressed at this, that Jews can let their hair down and formally and as a part of our religion, just for you have one day where you can be silly. So anyway, that's first thing. First thing you'll probably be seeing. The second thing is that people will be bringing, taking with them objects with which to make noise in order to drown out the name of Haman.
So I don't understand. Why don't we want to hear the name Haman?
Well, Jews have a particular mindset that our memories are extremely good, and we tend to remember everything, like the date that Moses was born, the date that Abraham, our forefather, our patriarch, was born, their death dates, and all this. We remember this stuff. And to give a huge compliment to anyone, and particularly even non-Jews, is to say, we will remember you for good, obviously. So, but the Haman's name comes up in the text of the Book of Esther. So, and to blot out his name is another way, is the closest thing to forgetting an insult that we can manage. So we make a lot of noise in order to blot it out. It's essentially, his essence is compressed into his name in a sense. So when we blot out the name of Haman, we are in effect blotting out his memory, and hopefully anyone who chooses to repeat his heinous acts and behavior.
Do me a favor, show me again what's going to happen when we see when we hear the name.
Every time the word Haman is mentioned in the biblical text, as it's being read, this and several hundred others, noise-making objects, not necessarily this, but noise-making objects will all come up and come alive and try to drown it out.
Well, I'm here at my friend's house, and we're about to go to the Beit Knesset for the Purim, but they need a kippah, so I'm going to try on one. What do you, no? I don't like that one. Okay, how about this one? That one doesn't fit, my head's too big. This one. No, that one's this. Here's the one Yoel wants me to wear. I don't like it. But my friends have suggested I wear this one when I go into the Beit Knesset, and so I'm all set and ready to go. We're going to celebrate the Purim.
I sure am glad Dale told me ahead of time what to expect, because I would have been completely caught off guard otherwise. I did feel a little out of place being the only guy in the synagogue who didn't have a costume and a noisemaker. I appreciated Dale encouraged me to loosen up and shout a boo to Haman. After the service, Yoel walked me less than 100 feet from Dale's Ashkenazi Orthodox synagogue into a Sephardic synagogue where they were also celebrating Purim. What surprised me more than the costumes or the noisemakers was how many guns I saw people carrying inside these synagogues.
There he is.
Hi.
Dale, tell me, I've never seen so many guns in one place in my life.
I'll bet.
You have one?
Yes, I carry a 45 Glock pistol with 2 clips. The reason being is that for many years in the Israeli military I received counter-terrorist training, and for about 15, 17 years I was a first responder. We have a crew of first responders here, and I'm retired from that now, but I still carry, I'm still armed, always.
What blessed me most was that these Jewish folks were still celebrating a holiday founded in the Bible as their ancestors did in ancient times, based on God's power. Just when I was ready to claim victory regarding the biblical full moon celebration amongst Jews, I found out that Jerusalem was celebrating the next day rather than with the town of Elazar. Then I opened my Bible to see why this might be, and to my delight, The answer was right there. This was done on the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th and the 14th of the same month, and they rested on the 15th day and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas who live in the rural towns make the 14th day of the month Adar a holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending portions of food to one another. Because Jerusalem is a walled city like Susa and Elazar is not, they celebrate Purim one day apart. This meant I needed to find a synagogue in Jerusalem so I could double dip in the Purim party. Boy, oh boy, did I find one. Kol HaNishma Reformed Synagogue in Jerusalem, which means voice of the Spirit. Let's just say they were taking spirit to another level.
We're here for Purim, and we're here with all the people from around Jerusalem. We're entering it with everyone to celebrate.
From beginning to end, these folks really celebrated. Their costumes were loud and their voices were even louder. And the ringleader was the head rabbi. Everyone seemed to be participating, and the noise only grew louder and louder each time Haman's name was mentioned during the reading of Esther. And the rabbi led the charge. I think some folks drank a few spirits before coming to the Purim celebration at Kol HaNishma. It was acceptable to dance, drink, and sing, but my favorite activity was to boo Haman. As everyone continued to celebrate, I wondered about what was happening at God's clock headquarters in the old city. After the service, I slipped away and made my way over to the clock church outside the Zion Gate, and as soon as I arrived, I looked up into the night sky and the bells began to ring. I knew where I wanted to be. When I arrived at the Western Wall, some people were praying as God's clock was peeking in as a witness, while others were dancing and singing under its bright light. Listening to the story of Purim and the Holy Tongue pierced the dark night with the light of God's Word. I was enjoying myself so much I really forgot about the time and took in everything that was happening around me. I even found my own Purim celebration posse. I was mesmerized as I imagined the ancient Israelites spending the night looking at God's clock in the sky from the same spot. As the moon continued its journey across the clear, dark sky of Jerusalem, I was filled with humility and thanks for the opportunity I was given to spend the night with God's people, celebrating under His night light. The next day, there was a festive atmosphere throughout Jerusalem as families dressed up and ventured out into public to show off their Purim costumes. My destination was to get back to the Western Wall where my military friends were on high alert. Holidays have been favorite times for terrorists to strike in Israel, not to mention spirits were still high after a night of dancing, drinking, and song. Even the Western Wall birds joined in the celebration of Purim.
Well, you all, I've been having myself a time. I have been entering into the celebration of Purim. Now, you can read about this celebration in the book of Esther. However, this is the first year where I've actually celebrated with my Jewish brothers and sisters. What's been amazing is I've been amongst Orthodox Jews in the West Bank. I've been amongst conservative Jews. I've been amongst Reform Jews. I've been amongst ultra-Orthodox Jews. But here's what's amazing to me. Every single group, regardless of their background, celebrated the event at the same time. How did they do this? Well, in the book of Esther, we find something amazing. Though we don't hear of God's name, there's no specific reference to God. His clock is there from the beginning into the end. The clock of God jumps off the pages in the book of Esther. And I just want to read one verse, chapter 9 of Esther, verse 27. 7. It says this: "The Jews took it upon themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who join them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed," and here it comes, "and at the time appointed." In other words, right in the Bible, it says there is an appointed time for the celebration. Now, I've been all over the old city of Jerusalem, and there are many people who have no clue, no idea about this time. But my Jewish brothers and sisters, they looked up in the sky, they determined what the time was, just like they did in the book of Esther, and they had a party, and I've been partying with them. We are so excited to be here. It's exciting to be one of those who's joined in with my Jewish brothers and sisters based on the understanding of God's clock.
As I left headquarters, I felt ready to deal with biblical time that is always ahead of our time. Join me in the next episode as we continue the process of discovery about God's clock from the biblical perspective. Search with me for the witness of God's clock hardwired into his creation by traveling to the rocket-launching Gaza border in the south to the military patrol Jordanian border in the north. Then learn with me how to tell time by looking at God's clock in the heavens. This is only a small sampling of the many people, places, and things I encounter as we delve deeper into the Time Will Tell series.
Please remember, Biblical Foundations Academy International depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.